Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast. I am Hub Arkush, along with my co-hosts every week. Kyle Nabors, of course, is the group sports editor at Shaw Media, and Sean Hammond is our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider beat reporter. And guys, we are well into it now. Sean and I have been out there sweating, not as bad as usual at training camp time. The weather hasn't been awful so far. I think the Bears have kind of settled into the idea that it all happens at Lake Forest now. No more going camping. Platteville well in the rearview mirror, and now Bourbonnais. It's been a few years since we've been down there. Actually, it was strange how it worked out. They decided to move everything back to their beautiful Lake Forest facilities, and then COVID hit and probably couldn't have gone camping anyway. So getting the routine down. And Sean, as it works I keep calling it the new collective bargaining agreement. It's actually a couple of years old. It just kicked in last year for the 21 season. But some of the new and additional restrictions on amount of practice time players can be asked to go through, the amount of contact. The way it works is there has to be 5 practices in what they call a ramp-up phase before they can actually put pads on and have contact. So we were out all last week, and those first 5 practices, almost walkthroughs, a lot of timing drills, a lot of 7-on-7, that type of stuff. The pads did go on Tuesday, and so we got to look at them bumping heads a couple times, and a day off on Thursday as we sit here and record, a day off for the players. We, of course, will continue to work, and they'll be back at it knocking heads on Friday. And I don't know. I'm curious for your take. We're obviously constantly playing the depth chart and starting lineup game because it's what everybody wants to know. But with so many new people here, so many veterans gone, and so much focus on finding young talent as opposed to, possibly thinking you're actually going to go out and contend for anything this year. It's been a mixed bag out there. What do you think you've seen so far?
Yeah, it's been a real mixed bag, but that's kind of what you expect with these first 2 padded practices. And really, it kind of feels like the first 2 real practices. They're out there, they're finally hitting each other a little bit. I thought it was good to see them, we get a little bit better sense of that running game, or we have the last couple of days, just seeing those offensive linemen move and be able to hit the defensive linemen ahead of them. And I thought David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert have looked pretty good. And obviously they're not, doing full tackling and all that stuff, but they're out there and they're hitting each other a little bit more. Sure, the offense has been a little iffy at times, but it's so early. I wouldn't overreact to that at this point. They struggled in the 2-minute drills on Tuesday, that first day with pads, and then they came back, and I thought yesterday they looked a little bit better at times, and they were able. Justin Fields was able to lead them down to a field goal in 2-minute drill, and they were moving the ball a little bit in other team sessions. It's still a work in progress. They're still trying to figure it out. And that offensive line, they're still moving guys around. They don't have a set five guys starting lineup at this point. And so they're testing things out, and mistakes are going to be made. And that's what this time of year is for.
Yeah, Kyle, I think we need to be clear. Even when the pads go on, this is still not a full live scrimmage. There is no tackling. There's no going to the ground, but at least they get that first step, that big bump. And it has been interesting in the offensive line. And for several reasons we'll get into, the offensive line has been the biggest story of training camp so far. And it's hard because they're constantly rotating 9 different guys in with the first group. Even when you think it's settled down, rarely do you see them run 3 or 4 more plays with the same 5 guys as they try and find, quote, the best 5. But we certainly have seen a little bit more now with the pads on. And what is interesting is those first 5 days, there was always at least 2 rookies running with the ones, some days 3, one day there was even 4. Ever since the pads went on, now the veterans, Michael Schofield didn't run with the ones at all until the pads went on. He's been getting a lot of that run now. Riley Reif has been both on the left and right side. But now, other than Braxton Jones, most of the rookies have been pushed back to the second group.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that continues like that over the next week as we head into that first preseason game. I want to say a week from Saturday, right, guys?
Right,
a week
right.
from Saturday, to see how consistent they get. We had a question up here really quickly, and we might as well just start diving in. Someone asking about, let's see if I can find it here. Sorry, guys, I got it lost. Robert Phillips, regular here. When could we hope for them to stop rotating the offensive line and to find the right combination? I'm intrigued to see how Matt Eberflus and Luke Getsy and the staff handle that over the next week, to see if they want any kind of consistency heading into that first preseason game, because I pretty much guarantee we're going to see a different combination coming out of that first preseason game than going back into training camp. I just don't know how consistent they want to be going into that, or if it's just going to be kind of a rotation all the way through that first preseason game.
Kyle, I think they could be rotating this offensive line well into week 4 or week 5 of the season, to be honest with you, as they try and figure this out, unless these two veterans, Reif and Schofield, really establish themselves as these are the guys that we need to protect Justin Fields this year. Matt Eberflus did tell us on Wednesday, I guess it was, that all of the starters will, he didn't say all of the starters will play in that first exhibition game against the Chiefs at noon a week from this Saturday. I believe that date is August 13th. And that's the only home exhibition at Soldier Field, by the way. They're just trying to establish, I think they'd love to see some of these kids starting. And minimally, they would love to see, and we'll get to it in a minute, Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borum starting, although we don't know what Tevin Jenkins' status is at this point, and he hasn't even been part of this rotation. I'm sure most of our listeners and viewers know that after working the first day of practice, we have not seen him since. So we'll get to that story in a few minutes. But there's so many of these kids that have a great chance to make the team and get snaps, but which ones are ready to play and how soon? To me, Sean, that's the open question. So I think what we'll probably see is the likely starting 5 in that third exhibition game, to maybe try and give them a quarter running together. But I would not be at all stunned if there were even changes in that group between that one and the opener against the 49ers at Soldier Field.
Yeah, I wouldn't really read into the starting lineup too much in that first preseason game. It wouldn't surprise me to see them throw Braxton Jones out there at left tackle just to see how he reacts, not necessarily because he's going to be your starter in week 1. Same goes for some of those other young guys on the offensive line. And I can see this being a work in progress throughout the month and possibly even into this season. Like you're saying, Hub, you want to get that settled down before then. And hopefully have your 5 that you're comfortable with. But, they got a lot of moving parts to this thing right now. And they're trying to figure out just what these young guys can do.
Go ahead, Kyle. I'm sorry.
I just want to throw this question out for the chat and see kind of what responses we get, Hub, and then I'll let you chip in there or chime in. What is the hope for everyone in the chat for you guys? Are you hoping to see these youngsters kind of be able to secure roles, come week 1, or would you rather see Riley Reif and now Michael Schofield out there where Justin Fields has a bit more veteran protection? It's kind of an interesting, like if Riley Reif, let's say, is 10 to 15% better come week 1, guys, like then what you might get out of Braxton Jones, maybe it's 20%. I'm just throwing numbers out there. Would you rather let the youngster develop early in the year, or would you rather have the security for Justin Fields?
Well, yeah, actually, Kyle, I was just going to follow up on what Sean was saying there, in that even with Riley Reif, which I think is a very good signing. I mean, they needed to bring in some veteran stability, and he gives them that. But I made the point, I know I tweeted about it, I can't remember if there was a column on it or not, that even though he has played more left tackle than right tackle in his NFL career, he has been a much better right tackle. He has actually played some good football out there. The reason he's on his 4th team is he's never really established himself as a very good left tackle. I mean, definitely, when you're not sure about the kids, you're safer with him over there. But what I was going to add, which we do see in these practices, which I found very interesting, I think it was the 2nd or 3rd day here, while they still were, doing these kind of walkthrough type practices, he was spending all his time on the left side, sometimes 1, sometimes 2. He got a lot of time with the ones with Jones. And when we talked to him after he was signed, he said he does prefer to play left tackle. But since the pads have gone on, Sean, it looks to me like he's been spending as much time on the right side as the left side. I think of all these youngsters, even though Braxton Jones, may have the furthest to go, he's coming not only from Southern Utah State. I'm not sure if it's FCS football, but it's certainly not Power 5 stuff. They were a 1-10 football team. I mean, he has not really played in a productive offense, and yet he is the one that seems to be, getting the most respect from the coaches, and so it's unclear at this point, whether Reif is here to play left tackle and let Jones learn once the season starts.
I tend to lean toward, this might be more about just getting Braxton Jones some snaps. He's a guy we haven't seen him play any position other than that left tackle spot. So if you want to get him some reps with the ones, the best option there is to move Riley Reif to the right side and open that spot up for Braxton. And certainly it's possible he could, be impressing his coaches and wind up winning that spot, but we're gonna have to see it play out. I still lean towards. I just feel like Riley Reif is going to wind up being that starting left tackle. You're right, Hub. We've seen him at right tackle a lot the last 2 days. But he's a veteran guy. He's been around the block. I still feel like it's going to wind up with Riley Reif on the left side and Larry Borum on the right side. But it's early. We'll have to see how it goes.
If they had a very viable option at left tackle, I think it would be a given that Riley Reif would be on the right side of the offensive line. He performed much better there. I think, Hub, you mentioned earlier, he performed a lot better on the right side than the left side over the course of his career, particularly the last few seasons. But we don't know what the Bears have at left tackle, so maybe you go with the veteran guy. Larry Borum, Sean, in your notebook, I want to say 2 days ago, Tuesday afternoon, had talked about it's if you're left-handed and you try and right-handed, it takes some time to get your mind like that, or to get your mind straight, and it's easier for some guys to flip from the left or right side. And I do wonder early in camp if that's what they're trying to figure out, which of these guys are able to make that switch quicker, as they try and figure out, okay, where do we slot these guys in? Who can we count on each side? Who needs to be more specialized? And then, maybe midway through camp, we start to see a more solid rotation. What do you think?
Yeah, I can certainly see that. I mean, I think, like I said before, we've only seen Braxton on the left side, and that seems to be, they want to get him comfortable in that spot, before they, if they're even thinking about moving him to the right side, get him comfortable on the left side first. And same with Larry. We asked these guys up in front of the podium about, switching positions on the O-line, and, they always downplay it like it's no big thing. But Larry's like, yeah, it's like writing with your opposite hand. And so, I think that's why we've seen Larry, in the spring, he did a little bit of left tackle, but since then, once training camp started, it's been a lot on the right side. And I think that's just where he's most comfortable at right now.
Well, and to me, Larry Borum is the most interesting part of this entire conversation, because not only am I pretty well convinced he is one of their best five, when we talk about ceilings and what we've seen so far, I think he may be the best offensive lineman on the team if he gets the chance to go out and prove it. And yet, when Braxton Jones is at left tackle and Riley Reif is at right tackle, Borum's not running with the ones because, Cody Whitehair is obviously your left guard. Sam Mustipher was making a run at that starting job at right guard. And then Michael Schofield comes in, and then Jatari Carter, who I wrote about the other day, has been impressive out there. Now, I think Borum is probably better than all of them, but and right guard was probably his best natural position coming out of Missouri. But as I said, when Jones and Reif are on the field at the tackles, and Jones is strictly a left tackle, you're not going to see Braxton Jones at right tackle. And that's part of the problem too, because if he's not one of your starting tackles, he's not really a swing tackle, so now it looks at who's the fourth tackle on the roster. Of course, knowing that Borum can play almost anywhere, Reif can play almost anywhere. They have Matt Eberflus talked about that. He thinks flexibility is key, and so many of these guys, can play at least two, if not three positions. And then we don't know the status of Lucas Patrick, who, I never understood why he was just given Sam Mustipher's job in the first place. I think that they're actually very similar, but there is no competition there. Patrick was brought in to be the starter. But with this hand and thumb, I think we've determined that he had to have some surgery on that thumb, even though the Bears will not confirm any of this. All we've been told is he's missing, some extended time. And so that puts a wrinkle in this too. And that brings us, guys, to the biggest question mark of all, the most mysterious part of this, which is what the hell's going on with Tevin Jenkins. And it was interesting, Sean, that after practice Wednesday, I think it was a slip on Matt Eberflus's part, but he at least did go on record as saying that Tevin Jenkins has not practiced 100% because of injury. That's not what he was saying the first few days. He was saying things he needs to work out with the trainers. We even speculated that, maybe he had COVID. And I'm sorry, guys, I'll take away the dog's squeaky toy in a minute. Again, right. I always marvel at what we pick up. Liza's having a good time for whatever it's worth. We'll get her a different toy in a second. Sean, we know no more about Tevin Jenkins right now than we did 1 year ago at this time, when we couldn't figure out why he wasn't practicing until we finally found out that he had a mysterious back injury that eventually required surgery. There was apparently I saw it, Tevin Jenkins is on Twitter, but not active. You don't hear from him. And yet suddenly there was this cryptic tweet, I think it was Tuesday, to a fan who had I guess DM'd him, don't believe everything you read. Well, Tev, I mean, we'd like to be able to write something. They're not reading anything because we don't know, So it's one of the more mysterious things I've ever seen. I had speculated from the beginning that they were probably looking for a deal for him, because at this point it's obvious that these coaches aren't in love with him. They demoted him to second string. He even ran with actually that first day of practice, he ended up with the third stringers for a little while, and so that's why it's hard to imagine that this is as simple as an injury when he then doesn't work or isn't visible for 6 days. We did get confirmation from Matt Eberflus. He said he has been in the facility working with them. And so I'm going to give this back to Sean to explain for a minute while I go put the dog out somewhere in the yard. Back in 1 second. Go ahead, guys.
I think we need more dogs in podcasts. I think that's a good thing. Maybe not for our audio, but just for our entertainment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the question posed to Matt Eberflus was a straight up yes or no question, like, is Tevin's absence 100% injury related? And he gave a one-word answer and said, yeah. But I don't, NFL coaches lie all the time. And I know Matt Eberflus is a new NFL head coach, and maybe he's still getting used to this whole lying thing. But I don't know if I believe that or not. I don't know what to think of that. Certainly I can see them, there's been the national reports out there from the NFL Network that a week ago said that, they were possibly shopping Tevin Jenkins, or at least they were picking up the phone. And that wouldn't surprise me at all based on everything we've seen. I mean, he seemed to be healthy that first day of training camp. We didn't see him go off with any injury. And then all of a sudden he hasn't been there in a week. So it's hard to know what to make of it.
The thing with the national reports about potentially trading Tevin Jenkins, though, is the Bears are picking up the phone. We just don't know if they're also picking up the phone and making the call, or
that could mean anything. Yeah.
With the speculation, the other NFL teams are seeing social media. Like, they see Tevin Jenkins isn't at practice, and they have no idea why he isn't there either. So it wouldn't surprise me if teams are calling and saying, well, is he injured, or are you guys looking to move him? Doesn't necessarily mean the Bears are trying to trade him. Oh, sorry, Hub. I had you on mute just so in case things went awry. There you go.
Probably a good idea, actually. The punchline on that is obviously it's the puppy, but the old lady who's supposed to be dog sitting for me, her big sister, just is laying there staring at her with her head cocked and the ears standing straight up, like, you're getting in trouble, don't you? So anyway, hopefully we've got them sorted out now. Actually, now I'm really in trouble because I woke my wife up, but I know that she will take care of them and get them out of the way. At any rate, the other big question, guys, is how do you enhance? I mean, obviously, if you're trying to trade a guy that you just used the 39th pick in the draft on 14, 15 months ago, you're not going to get fair value in return. I mean, one of the things people have asked, well, if you do trade him, what are you going to get? And my best pick is my best guess, I should say, is depending on the team, maybe you could squeeze a fifth out of somebody, but I think you're probably talking about a 6th or 7th round pick if you do deal him now. And you know what? If he's not going to play for you for whatever reason, then get the pick. I don't care what it is. That's not the point of this. But what I was going to say is, you're not enhancing his trade value with all this mystery, So even if they want to trade him, it still doesn't answer the question, because the best chance of trading him and getting the most for him is put him out there, and at least, we're not allowed to be releasing video or anything, but there's fans, who aren't supposed to be doing it either, but they're out there with their phones and they're shooting videos and they're posting them on social media. And so at least if he's working, some teams could get a sense of where he's at, but you're probably, hurting his trade value, when you don't have him out there. So it's a huge mystery. And we don't want to mislead anybody into thinking that, I'm not saying they're going to trade him. I'm not saying he's seriously injured. I'm not saying that it's his fault or that these are attitude things. But this is when NFL teams take their covert operation status to the extreme, that I think they do themselves more harm than good, because they're clearly, making the kid a topic of conversation he probably doesn't enjoy and doesn't want to be part of. And I think they're diminishing his value if they do want to try and get something in return for him.
Yeah, and why not just why not just put him on the sidelines? Show him on the bike, show him moving around a little bit. You got Roquan Smith out there not practicing. Why can't Tevin Jenkins be doing the same thing? And I think I've seen photos and videos of Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco. He's out at practice. He's not participating. He's not, they're not trying to get him hurt, but he's still out there and showing his face a little bit. And I would think that would only help your cause if you're trying to trade him.
Yeah, I mean, Kyle, Sean makes such a great point. We have seen Roquan every day, and so they told us what his status is. We understand it. We know what kind of guy he is. So even though it's probably frustrating and disappointing to some, we know exactly what's going on. Jimmy Garoppolo, actually a little bit of a different story. He was actually cleared for full work yesterday. In his case, he was doing some stuff out there as part of the rehab of that shoulder. But with Tevin, you just create these mysteries, and it's the second year in a row. And I just personally feel that it does the young man no favors, and you almost wonder if he wouldn't love to talk to us and tell us what's going on. But again, that the team is restricting him.
Yeah, it kind of hurts, that I guess it does lend credence to Matt Eberflus when he says that it's 100% an injury issue and they're not trying to trade him. Because as you guys said, if they were trying to trade him, you would think you'd want him out there on the field, right? Like it's just odd that we haven't seen him. Have we seen him at all since that first practice?
Not since day one. No.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's seen him. It's such an odd thing. The 8-hour vibes chimed in here. I think Brad Biggs, our friend over at the Chicago Tribune, had talked about this. I'm guessing maybe that's where 8-hour vibe picked up on this. And I felt like it was a little bit of revisionist history here. I'm going to bring this up though. 8-hour vibes. I said, we wish we wouldn't have cut Leno because we were so confident in Tevin Jenkins. Bad move in retrospect. It was a bad move in retrospect, but I don't think, keeping Charles Leno around would have helped all that much. I don't know about you guys. Like, I wasn't impressed with Charles Leno. I thought it was time to move on. And if I remember right, the Leno thing was, wasn't that a cap casualty too? Weren't they in pretty bad shape?
That was part of it. Yeah.
They got significant cap relief. It was about a $10 million savings, but at the same time, they also got tired of seeing their quarterbacks get killed. And so, Charles Leno is a great guy. And interestingly enough, they're pleased with him in Washington. They gave him a second contract, although not the same as the first. But he was a below average left tackle. And when you have below average players, you try and get better. So the answer is no. It wouldn't have been better to keep Charles Leno around. It would have been better to more quickly find a suitable replacement, and let's not forget that it had been a while since Charles Leno arrived that they had really been stable at the left tackle position. He was a 7th round pick out of Boise State who surprised everybody, which is why you can't discount Braxton Jones, because Leno wasn't the starter his rookie year, but he did end up starting a couple games due to injury and was the day one starter his second year. But to the initial question, No, I this, I mean, that's revisionist history. Charles has been gone for a little while now, and so he doesn't fit this conversation. I don't think anyway.
Yeah, like I said, I think Brad brought it up originally with the Tevin Jenkins news going around. I think it's been kind of floating around Twitter since then. I wanted to address it with 8 Hour Vibes out there. Charles Leno, as Hub said, a very nice guy, and actually has had a nice career, as Hub was saying when talking about 7th round pick. But it was time for the Bears to move on there. You just going with Tevin Jenkins and not really having a backup plan proved to be wrong. Although Jason Peters actually, kind of saved the day last year. People overlook that, how much Jason Peters helped this team and stabilize that offensive line.
Well, not only was he an outstanding leader for all the other guys in the room, the entire team, but he was playing very well by the second half of the season. Was he back to his Hall of Fame level at the age of 39 with no offseason and training camp? No. But it was the best left tackle play the Bears had in 3 or 4 years. And, I think that if Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy were still here, they probably would have wanted to bring him back for 1 more year. But with the new regime and with this obvious rebuild, that just made no sense. I mean, you're not going to come in and let Khalil Mack go for cap reasons and not re-sign Allen Robinson and James Nichols. I can go over the whole list and then bring back Jason Peters. It just didn't make sense once they cleaned house in the front office.
I had a question directed at me that while we're talking about offensive line, I see if I can find it back up here. Bearback, I believe a new one, Bearback coming in here, asked me, do you think offensive line will give up more than 30 sacks? Yeah, I'd say more than 30 is definitely going to be the case. I don't think it's going to be a terrible situation. This isn't like a David Carr first year down with Houston Texans type thing where Justin Fields is going to be completely running for his life, I don't think, guys. And part of that is, one, I expect Justin Fields to get rid of the ball quicker this year. I expect him to be better in that regard. I also expect the offense to just in general be more efficient in terms of the power run game. I don't think we're going to see as heavy as a pass combination. And I think they're going to do things to try and get the ball at Justin's hands pretty quickly. Do you guys agree?
Well, the new scheme certainly lends itself to that, but I think part of the answer to that question is when you go back and watch the tape of 17 games last season, I'd say as many as half the sacks that Justin Fields took were his fault, not the offensive lines. And so the question is probably as much about the development of Justin Fields as it is about the offense. And by the way, I'm not criticizing Fields for that. That's very common with rookie quarterbacks. That's why you don't play rookie quarterbacks on day one if you can avoid it. So 30, I think, Sean. I don't have.
I'm counting right now. Actually,
I think it's a middle of the road number. To be honest with you,
it looks like there were 22 quarterbacks that took at least 30 sacks last year.
Yeah, 30. So, 30 is, I think, easy. Maybe 40 to 45 is probably where I would ballpark the number.
Yeah,
once you hit 40, you're talking about top 5 in sacks allowed.
Okay.
You tend to look at, I know the best teams in the league, the teams that are top 5 each year usually range about, 17, 18 to 25, 26, something like that. And one of the measures you look at is you don't want to be giving up more than a sack and a half a game, which gets you to about 25 or 26. If you get to 2 sacks a game, it's not unusual. So now you're in that 34 range. I think the numbers that really scare you is when you're giving up, 36, 37 or more. And again, without even looking, I'll guarantee you there were a number of teams that happened to last year. I don't know exactly how many.
My golf buddy popping in here. Sorry, he set the over under on sacks at 38.5. I think that's a good line.
So Justin was sacked 36 times last year in 10 games. Now, yeah, like you're saying, Kyle, hopefully the offense is better. Hopefully his decision making is a little bit quicker. But I still it wouldn't shock me if he winds up with a lot of sacks again. And that's not. Look at Joe Burrow last year. He was sacked a million times, and that offensive line obviously wasn't good. But you can overcome those things if not every sack is the same, and the situation matters.
Yeah, I mean, I a lot of this to me falls on Justin Fields, in terms of the sack numbers at least, and overall in terms of like the efficiency of the offense. The offensive line probably matters as much as Justin Field going into this, but in terms of the sack numbers, I think a lot of it's going to come down to how Justin progresses reading the field this year.
Yeah, and let's not forget if he was sacked 36 times in 9 games, in 10 games, he was sacked 9 times in 1 game when he never should have been on the field. So I mean that in itself just skews the whole thing.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's not just about the sacks. That you just worry about his health. It's about the plays they disrupt and the ability to put together a functional offense. And so, to that point, I think Kyle's made the best point here, which is that a lot of what Luke Getsy does, you study some Packers tape and you will find that Aaron Rodgers, could be in the lower half of the league with most sacks if it was not for his escapability in the pocket and the number of times that they have that outside zone read run game going up there and creating space, and some of the misdirection things that they'll do with him on play action. So there are other ways besides just hanging it on the offensive line to avoid sacks. And I do think that that's a big part of what Luke Getsy hopes to do.
How much of that in Green Bay, they looked over the last couple of years, they did a really good job of getting the ball out quickly, particularly the Devontae Adams. They used him a lot near the line of scrimmage. The Bears don't really have at least an established presence in terms of like a big bodied wide receiver to use. We had a question early in this that said, who do you think, or along the lines of who do you think emerges as that number 2 wide receiver for the Bears? A week into camp, do you guys see anything developing as a kind of in that race to see who gets a starting job?
That's such a great question, Kyle, because Sean and I were talking about this before we left Hallis Hall yesterday. My answer to the question is no. I think it's wide open. I have been impressed with the physical abilities of N'Keal Harry that we've seen so far. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, everybody's talking about Equanimeous St. Brown yesterday. And I come to camp assuming that he's 50-50 to make the team, based on the player that he was in Green Bay. He had 4 years up there. They did everything they could to make him the number 2, and he never became anything more but the number 4 or number 5. And that's why they let him get away this year, even though their wide receiver position isn't set. And yet asked who he's getting the most comfortable with as far as somebody he knows. Justin Fields yesterday said Cole Kmet and EQ, he said, which is Equanimeous St. Brown. Luke Getsy has talked glowingly about his work ethic and the way he grew last year in Green Bay, even though if you go look at his numbers in Green Bay, he barely got his hands on the football. So he's a guy that is certainly gaining some traction here. I think that, Byron Pringle was pretty much assumed to be the starter across from Darnell Mooney when they signed him, even though he did nothing in Kansas City to earn that spot. And so it is a wide open position. And then you got Velus Jones Jr., who, according to every scout I talked to, they seriously overdrafted in the 3rd round. He may have been the best returner coming out of college, but unless you're Devin Hester, who of course was a 2nd-round pick, but they also thought at the time that they were going to convert him from corner or wide receiver and he was going to be a factor, and that never happened. But as a receiver, drafting Jones any higher than the 5th or 6th round based on his college experience and production is kind of nuts. So I think that right now that competition is pretty much between Harry and St. Brown and Velus Jones and which of the 3 am I forgetting? St. Brown, Harry, Velus Jones, and Byron Pringle. And then you go with Darnell Mooney. Those are probably 5 of your 6 roster spots right there. And you're going to see a fair amount of 3 wide receiver on the field, Sean. But I don't really have a clue right now who becomes. And the other scary part about it is that what you're really looking for is a number 1. Because Darnell Mooney is a really high-end number 2, but we have no reason yet to believe that he can be a number 1 based on his drops and some other things he has to work out. So just looking to, who's the second most targeted receiver, I don't know at this point. I don't know if you've got any better idea than I do based on what we've seen so far.
No, I don't necessarily as we're looking towards the season. I will say, and again, it's only been 2 days of padded practices, but based on the usage rate and the amount of snaps with the ones, Equanimous St. Brown has been out there a lot. I feel like he is going to make this roster and be a part of this offense. He's been, a lot of times it seems like he's that big bodied guy running a crossing route over the middle. And they've been able to hit him on plays like that, a number of times. And, while Darnell Mooney might not be your prototypical number one, I will say that I've been impressed with the cohesion he has with Fields. And I guess that's not a surprise. They've been together now for a year, and they obviously did all the offseason work together. But, I think they very clearly have the best connection of all the receivers, Mooney and Fields. And you can see that in the 7-on-7s. You can see that, all over the field. And similarly with Cole Kmet. I think Cole Kmet's going to be very involved in this passing game, and he's probably going to wind up being more like your number 2 target, even though he's not a receiver. He's a guy who Justin Fields has a good connection with, and he's still building that. It's really hard to say who the number 2 is going to be because on paper it's Byron Pringle. The last few days, I don't know that we've necessarily seen that. He's made a couple nice plays here and there, but he's certainly not a guy who's standing out. I would say it's hard to really pick anyone who's standing out from that group.
Kyle, I will add this: the guy with the bloodlines is Harry. I mean, coming out of school, he's the 32nd pick of the draft. He's the last pick in the first round. You think and hope you're getting a number 1, and when you look at him physically, you see a number 1. It's what you don't see in Darnell Mooney. And he has looked good in what he's done so far. I mean, he makes contested catches better than anybody else on the field. And what did Velus Jones Jr. describe him as Hercules?
Yeah.
He's 6'4", 225. So he's certainly the guy that I guess you'd be the most hopeful for. But that's where these preseason games are going to get really interesting because you can't. I mean, it isn't a full contact situation. It isn't a game situation. And after, 3, 4, 5, 7 days in a row running against the same guys, it's not the same thing as going out every Sunday and handling the opposing defense. So I think that competition during these exhibition games is going to be every bit as significant as this offensive line competition.
Yeah, it's going to be really important to try and get an idea of where the separation is for these wide receivers. I agree about the upside of Harry. I think that's the highest upside out of this group. Maybe Velus Jones Jr., but that's more of a project. In terms of who can have an immediate impact come week 1, I think Harry's your best bet. Obviously flamed out in New England, but you look at all the success that the Patriots have had with drafting and developing players over the years. Wide receivers kind of been a dead zone for them. It continues to be a roster turnover, particularly these last 4 to 5 years. They just keep churning through wide receivers. So I wonder how much of that affected Harry. So, I mean, a second chance here for him. Don't know if he can do it, but I don't know if any of these guys can do it. But Harry, to me, seems like the most likely scenario to step into that starting role.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. And again, guys, we're not – I mean – I don't know how to say it. I'm happy to make guesses for you, but we know the one thing we know for sure is that, Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles and Luke Getsy haven't made these decisions yet. It's just too early. They threw together a lot of young talent, and they're trying to figure out who's going to emerge right now. So, it'll actually make these 3 exhibition games a little more interesting than exhibition games usually are. I have a rule that I don't travel for exhibition games because it's a waste of time, and I'm not going to break the rule this year. But you almost kind of want to be there for these just to see what's happening. But obviously, we'll get to see them on tape and on TV, and that's when they'll figure it out.
Jimmy K here had commented, St. Brown didn't play in Green Bay because there were much better wide receivers in front of him. That is not the case. Equanimous St. Brown couldn't catch the ball in Green Bay, was part of his issue. He did not have any trust with Aaron Rodgers. That really kind of, once that snowballed with Aaron Rodgers, I'm pretty sure Equanimous St. Brown was called out publicly by Aaron Rodgers at one point, saying that he couldn't trust him.
Well, not only that, Jimmy K, but who were those other guys? You tell us, because it's just that's not even close to the reality.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Devontae Adams is there, but Randall Cobb comes back a shadow of himself. The Packers were down to practice squad guys and guys off the street that were running ahead of him. Yeah, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, who for God knows what reason got paid by the Chiefs, but the Packers didn't want him back either. So if these guys were better than him, what's going on? No, listen. EQ, as they call him, class young man, former Domer. I know that's big with a lot of folks. A lot of good things going for him. And he's a guy you do want to pull for. And yes, he's got traits and physical ability that is impressive. But one of the things that him and Valdez-Scantling shared in Green Bay is that they dropped the football as much as they caught it. And so now they're both, in their fifth years, and I hope that they find new lives with their new teams, but it was not the competition that held him down in Green Bay.
Brent Morgan just popped in with the question, pivoting over to the defense here. I am worried about our run defense. It was bad last year, and I do not see an improvement from our D-line on the run. Hub, thoughts on that?
Yeah, Brent, I mean, it's not something I really have thought much about, to be honest with you. It wasn't, league average as bad as you're suggesting. It was actually pretty good early in the year, and then it started to slip. But I think it probably ended somewhere middle of the pack. And I understand what you're saying. And when you lose players, like Akeem Hicks and Bilal Nichols, and even, Danny Trevathan and Alec Ogletree and Tayshaun Gibson, the guys that you're replacing them with, there is some cause for concern. But again, you're playing a different scheme, and whether this scheme is going to be better or worse against the run. One of the weaknesses of the 3-4 was always that it was or is a little easier to run against for good running teams. But it's interesting, Brent, when you say you're worried about the run defense. I mean, if we're talking about competing, I'm worried about every facet of the Bears on both sides of the football, because I don't know that they have the talent to win more than 4, 5, 6 games. But are there specific concerns with the run defense? Actually, Sean, maybe we go the other way, because I know that there's a lot of excitement about Jaquan Brisker. There is some excitement about Nicholas Morrow. Angelo Blackson has actually he's been one of the more impressive defensive linemen. And by the way, Robert Quinn, now that he's here, I'm watching, it was day before yesterday, and here, full speed flying downfield, 20 yards downfield, comes Robert Quinn to finish the play. This is in a training camp, 11 on 11, and people, don't give him credit for what a complete player he was last year, not just a pass rusher. So, Sean, there's some tools here, and I think it's the real question is, can the kids play, and how will they adapt to the scheme change?
Yeah, we've seen Justin Jones obviously and Angelo Blackson have been looking like the starters in those defensive tackle spots. Blackson hasn't practiced in a few days. I think he's dealing with some injury that we're not aware of, but he was out on the bike a few times. Those guys have looked really good, and it's a different defense, and it's going to be hard to know what these guys are going to look like against the run until we actually see them in the preseason and week 1, week 2, and we're able to see what's going on. And I would be I'm not overly worried about that. I'm a little bit not worried, but I would be more concerned about just getting that cohesion in the secondary. When you're throwing in 2 rookies and you're trying to learn this new system, and Kyler Gordon's been playing a lot in the slot these last few days, and that's a tough thing for a rookie to do. I know he did that in college, but it's certainly not easy. There's a lot more responsibilities in the run game. I think this is sort of a wait and see. We're going to have to see when these guys go against an offense that's not the Chicago Bears in practice.
And that's an interesting point that Sean just made about Kyler Gordon, Kyle, because what that means is everybody's second favorite target. It seems like the haters go for Sam Mustipher, completely unjustified first. The next guy they go for is Kendall Vildor, a little more justified, but not completely justified. When Kyler Gordon is in the slot, Kendall Vildor is the starting boundary corner across from Jalen Johnson. And he was singled out as a guy who's actually had some good runs out there. And we've talked about this. It's too early to quit on him. And so they are starting to show some depth at that cornerback position, because all these kids, I think, have Sean, I don't know if you'd agree, but I'm talking about the younger ones. They've all looked pretty good out there. I know there's real excitement about Gordon and Brisker.
I think we may have lost Sean there for a
So
second.
is Hub cutting out or am I cutting out? I can't
you
tell.
cut out for a second. I can answer that though. No, well, I guess you are back here. I think we got you. You want to go ahead, Sean?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite catch the end of. I didn't catch the end of what Hub was saying.
So we're just talking about the young talent on the back end and feeling confident about Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon. Correct, Hub?
Yeah, well, I don't know if you caught the part where I was telling everybody that Kendall Vildor has been singled out a little bit by the coaches as having looked pretty good out there, and you can see it. And then that there is justifiable excitement about Gordon and Brisker, and that there is some encouragement about some of the younger players on this defense. I haven't seen as Dominique Robinson. When you're invisible, it's not a good thing. And you don't expect too much out of these rookies. I haven't seen a lot there, but Travis Gibson's been very active. And so I think that there is some excitement about this young defense and especially this young secondary.
Yeah, guys, head over to shawlocal.com. I got the story up right now. Actually, I spoke with Kendall Vildor yesterday about getting benched last year and just his approach now that he's got this opportunity in front of him. Because he's getting a chance with the ones here. And somebody in the chat says he'll be back on the bench when Thomas Graham is back, and I don't know that that's necessarily going to be the case. It could be the case, certainly. Graham was expected to compete for that slot nickel spot, and you would think that would mean Kyler Gordon could go back to the boundary, but they've spent all this time with Kyler in the slot, and maybe they're seeing his potential there, and they like what they see. And there's no we can't anoint Thomas Graham the slot corner just because we saw a couple of good games last year. He's got to earn that spot too, and so I think Kendall Vildor is very much in the mix, and you're right, Hub. If I'm a Bears fan, I'm real excited about Gordon and about Brisker. I think those guys are going to add a lot to this secondary, and they're going to give it a good energy boost, a good youthful boost here.
Yeah, Kyle, I've talked about Graham a lot, and I really like the kid, and I know they do too. He's got some special traits, but this may be the easiest position to define because in my mind, obviously Jaylon Johnson and Kyler Gordon, and then. To me, Kendall Vildor and Thomas Graham are all pretty much locks for this roster. And then I think Tevin Young, if he's healthy, probably is too. They've got a bunch of other young corners out there. That would be 5. Many teams will carry 6 or sometimes even 7. So there may be room for another 1 or 2. But I think all those guys are on the team. And I'm not so sure they can't all play, so it really could be a strength for these guys.
Kind of putting a bow on the defensive talk here, going back to what Brent said too, asking about the run defense. Overall, I think you should feel much better about the defense and the offense, and that's not surprising. I don't think when you're talking about Matt Eberflus and Alan Williams coming in, but I bring up those 2 names because I think that's as much as anything is a good reason to feel confident about the run defense and just overall the quality of the defense of getting a solid, maybe not great defense, but a technically sound defense. You look at what Matt Eberflus and Alan Williams did the last few years with that run defense in Indianapolis. There are not a ton of standout names, a lot of household names with that defense, but they played really well as a unit, particularly against the run over the last few years.
Yeah, guys, as long as Robert Quinn is here, and make no mistake, if he plays anywhere near to the level he did last year, he'll be dealt by the trade deadline and should be because of the rebuild. And I'll be sad because I love having him here. I think he's absolutely a class act. But as long as he's here anchoring that front group and then, the other people that we just talked about, and with all the exciting young talent in the secondary, I think there's reason to think the turnaround on this defense could come quick. The big question, obviously, right now is at linebacker because, while Roquan will be on the field at some point, we have no idea how and when that's going to shake out. I had hoped that once we saw all the other hold-ins, except for Derwin James getting their deals, that the Bears would get a deal done with Roquan too. But we don't really know what's holding that up. I'm really intrigued by Nicholas Morrow, but he had 5 years with the Raiders and could never keep and hold a starting job. And then beyond that, if Matt Adams or Joe Thomas are your other starter, so I think nobody's asking about it, but it's the group in the middle that probably is the concern right now. And yes, there's plenty of talent there. They could be great too if Roquan comes back 100% and Morrow plays to his physical ability. But to me, if we're talking defense right now, it's the linebackers that are the biggest question mark.
Yeah, they need Roquan back, and just looking at this. The stats from the past couple of years, I would say that this is maybe more telling than what you're seeing on the practice field. But the Colts have been a top 10 all 4 years under Eberflus. They were top 10 against the run. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about that. I think that's going to be an area where they will, even if they have some issues early, they'll figure it out.
Well, so we know Roquan, once he's back, is going to be at the weak side spot. So far in camp, have you guys noticed any kind of consistent rotations of the linebackers? Who's getting that first chance to fill those other two spots?
Oh, there's no rotation. I mean, Nicholas Morrow he's going to have the green dot. He's calling Roquan will have the title of captain, but basically Nicholas Morrow is the captain of this defense right now, and it's not because Roquan is holding out or holding in or whatever we're calling it. We've known, really, they started talking about this in the spring, that they were hoping that Morrow could make all the calls. And that's because actually I got Alan Williams, the defensive coordinator, explained this to me as to what the differences are in this scheme. And he explained why they like the Mike linebacker, the guy in the middle, to be making all the calls, because he's got the best view or the widest panorama of the offense in front of him. So Morrow is the guy at the Mike. And then it becomes the Sam. And, right now there's no question it's Matt Adams. I mean, he and Joe Thomas are journeyman veterans, but Adams is, probably a little more familiar with these coaches and maybe a little bit better athlete. And whether he can hold that position throughout a season remains to be seen. But that's one spot where we're not seeing any of the kids, Caleb Johnson, Jack Sanborn, CJ Avery, some of these undrafted free agents. That right now is your first four are pretty well set, with Thomas being number 4 and Adams probably starting at the Sam. Sean, I don't know, maybe you've seen something different.
No, I agree. Yeah, Adams has been in there a lot, and they're not going to have 3 linebackers on the field all that much, even though that's their base defense. It's really not that big of a concern, because you're going to see that slot corner in there a lot more, and whether that's Kyler Gordon or somebody else. And it's Nicholas Morrow right now, and it's Matt Adams. Those two guys with Roquan out are getting a lot of the snaps, and hopefully you can get Roquan back in there, in a timely manner. We'll see. That's still obviously a work in progress, but he's been there. I think he went and did a workout yesterday. I saw him take the cart to the other field. He brought his cleats and a water bottle, so I assume he was going to get a workout in or something. But he looks good. He looks like he could just step right in there once he gets this figured out.
Kyle, this is a pretty simple equation. I think I talked about this on the podcast a couple months ago, but down at the owners' meetings in Florida at the end of March, I got a chance to visit with Flus a little bit, and we talked about. I asked him about the Sam linebacker spot, and he told me something I didn't really realize. But he said in his version of the Tampa 2, which he learned from Rod Marinelli, who of course grew up in it with Lovie Smith, the Sam linebacker, and these are his words, is only on the field for maybe 12 to 18% of the snaps. That's how much they are in nickel and dime packages or sub packages. And so, or sometimes they run a hybrid safety linebacker out there and line them up with the linebackers. So the linebacker group really comes down to Roquan and Nick Morrow. And there's tremendous potential there, but a lot of unknowns. Roquan because of his contract situation, and Morrow because of his past, even though he's a great story. We need to add here with Roquan, I think it's because he's such a class act that we assume the best. But the way these things can go sometimes is that all that really matters for him contractually is he gets this 5th vested season in, and he does not have to show up until week 10 to make that happen. So, I mean, he could be holding in well into the season. I hope not. That doesn't sound like Roquan. That's not the way you would expect this to go. But it is a very real possibility, and it does happen with these guys. So we're going to have to wait and see.
Well, and if this season goes south fast, I mean, what's the rush from his perspective? Why hurry back to play for a bad team?
Well, I'll tell you what the rush is even in that rookie deal, I think he's got about a $10 million base this year, and they can start finding him significantly if he is sitting out regular season games, regardless of what list he's on. So, there's leverage on both sides. But this is where what I'm really saying is you certainly hope it doesn't get acrimonious because as long as they're, trying to work it out together, this is fine. But if it does get to the point where they're really unhappy with each other, then it can start to get ugly.
Yeah, as long as Roquan Smith is showing up every day, I think you should feel confident that they're talking and making progress. If all of a sudden Roquan wasn't to be on the sideline, that's when I would start to get concerned. But I expect they're going to get this figured out before week 1, guys.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I was just, explaining that actually is a possibility, I see no reason to believe that that's going to happen. But historically, that's the way these things do go, half the time or whatever. This whole hold-in thing is a new phenomena that everybody's, getting used to this year. And it seems to have worked for more guys than it hasn't. But unfortunately, Roquan and Derwin James are two guys who it hasn't. I mean, another one is Deontay Johnson in Pittsburgh, who I don't know what he thinks he's holding in for. He apparently wants deals like the ones DK Metcalf and Deebo Samuel get, and I've got a better chance of getting a contract before he gets that deal. So, but that's we're getting pretty far afield now. I
mean, I like Deontay Johnson, but I don't think
yeah.
I don't think he's earned the DK contract yet.
No, I'm sure he doesn't want that, but he's a guy, not a first-round pick, so there is no fifth-year option. In 3 years, he's had 1,000-yard season, which was last year, and that was 100 and some catches for just over 1,000. So he's only averaging, I don't have it in front of me, but again, probably, 10 yards, maybe 11. I think it's 10 something. And that's just not going to get you one of these mega deals that these wide receivers are getting these days. We should touch on, I feel obligated to, because we are running out of time. It has been a historic week in the NFL, guys. And I don't think we can just ignore this stuff, not that it is Bears talk. But first comes the news of the Deshaun Watson 6-game suspension. I know most of you who are with us and listening to us are serious fans, so you understand the new process or processes that brought them to this point. It has been appealed by the NFL now, and now whether Deshaun Watson and his lawyer like it or not, or whether the NFLPA likes it or not, there's going to be a final decision coming from either Roger Goodell or somebody else he designates. I'm hearing all this talk about how it could end up in federal court. All that can do is delay, because this is part of the CBA. This is working exactly the way it was negotiated by the Players Association and the owners. It is enshrined in the collective bargaining agreement, and that supersedes the laws that you go to court and sue over. So it's back in Roger Goodell's hands. He's obviously going to get more than 6 games, and it's been interesting. I don't know what you're reading, guys. Sean, I'll ask you first of the public reaction is, but I'm hearing almost unanimous, if not an overwhelming majority of people, regardless of what side. Every player I've talked to says it's a joke he only got 6 games, because he has been found guilty, as the independent arbitrator said, of egregious sexual assault. And she claimed that the only reason she only got 6 games was based on precedent. It wasn't violent sexual assault. But that set the I don't know what to call the community, but I think everybody is opposed to sexual assault. But immediately everybody's asking, well, what kind of sexual assault isn't violent? The fact that he's not accused of rape. I mean, it's absurd that he only got 6 games from where I sit, and I'm not hearing anybody who really wants to dispute that. So I think the most intriguing thing right now, Sean, is the NFLPA even going to try and fight whatever Roger Goodell comes up with?
Yeah, I mean, I think they will fight it just because that's what they do. But it's, man, what a mess, and you're right, Hub. That was a really strict interpretation of the previous precedents, and It certainly feels like it should be more than that. And maybe, it seems like that's the NFL's perspective too. While as we learned yesterday, they're appealing the ruling, and I don't know how this ends. I would lean towards, I could see Deshaun Watson getting a few more games, but Hub, do you really think it's gonna? I mean, we were talking, days ago about the NFL was trying to get him, indefinite, a full year suspension, and I don't necessarily see that happening at this point. Hub, do you?
Well, what my sources are telling me is that, in fact, not only does Goodell want to go for the indefinite suspension, minimum 1 year with a request for reinstatement, but he's also talking about adding a hefty financial fine to try and send a message to the Cleveland Browns, who tried to screw around with the contract and make it easy on him. So do I think they're going to fine him $20 million? No. But think about this, guys. They set that up so his base salary this year is $1 million, and his base salary next year is $46 million. So even if it was, but think about this, even if it was a 6-game suspension, you're talking about a $15 million fine or whatever. I didn't do the percentages. And that's why there's so much outrage about this. And while I agree with Sean, Kyle, that the NFLPA probably will feel obligated to fight it, this may be the one time they don't, because most of their own members agree that this is just wrong. And think of how they're going to be portrayed and painted in the public eye if they do fight it. So it's interesting. The players, they were outraged over Roger Goodell being judge, jury, and executioner. So when they sat down and did this CBA, that was something they focused on, and they did get it changed. Okay, so now they have this procedure where they mutually agree on an independent arbitrator, and I think the NFL probably is fairly genuine. And if she had come back with anything that seemed reasonable, then they probably would have just said okay, and the process would have worked. But the fact that she missed so badly on the punishment, and in fairness to her, because there is no precedent for this. I mean, there is no NFL player, even though he hasn't been found guilty of anything, by settling all 24 cases. And this investigator said she did find him guilty of the 3 principal questions she had to answer to make it egregious sexual assault. They had no choice. And so it's a bizarre situation. But as always, the Players Association comes out on the short end. And, in this case, they could end up looking very bad if they try and argue that he doesn't deserve more than this.
I wouldn't expect that the NFLPA is going to put up much of a fuss if and when this is extended past 6 games. I wonder if the Cleveland Browns made this situation worse for themselves in terms of the punishment was going to be handed down by the way they did that contract. Kind of, it was almost flaunting it, like we're gonna set this up in a way where if we get that 6th game where it's going to hurt them the least amount possible. Like if they had not done the things they did to his contract, Hub, do you think that would have maybe not drawn the ire that it has?
That's the one question I can answer absolutely from the people I've talked to. There is no question about that, Kyle. Had they not screwed around with the contract, I think that then Goodell might have come back and said we're making it 10 games or 8 games or something like that. But I don't want, this is going to make them look bad, and I don't mean it the way I'm going to say it, but they are almost more upset about the contract part than they are about the 6 games. They're very upset about both. I think that Roger Goodell and most of the owners do take this seriously, and they know that this is not sufficient punishment, but they are furious about what the Browns did with that contract. They screwed up quarterback negotiations. Forget even the personal conduct policy. They screwed up quarterback negotiations for everybody. It caused the Cardinals to turn around and give $230 million to Kyler Murray. Now, that was a stupid contract, and they shouldn't have done it. But yes, there are 31 other owners who wouldn't care if the Haslams had their team taken away from them right now because of what they did with this contract. So that is a very big part of it.
Yeah, you're not looking for negative PR, and the Cleveland Browns were out there just kind of, thumbing their nose at everyone. That's gonna, I don't know how else to say it. It's gonna piss off Roger Goodell when a team is making it obvious that they're trying to say that this even if it's not, it makes it look like a sham investigation when they're doing things where they feel that they've been able to, they know the outcome well enough that they can structure a contract to get around any potential punishment. The NFL does not want that kind of look out there.
Well, and they did it for a known sexual deviant.
Right.
And so, I mean, I guess is the safest way I can say it. So we're already over time, but obviously the one other huge story, we'll just spend a minute or two on it. The Miami Dolphins fined a first-round pick, a third-round pick. Owner Stephen Ross fined $1.5 million. His vice chairman, Beal, was fined another $500,000 for actually initiating the contact and the tampering charges. But of real significance is this was a different independent arbiter who did the research, a former prosecuting attorney, and I believe this one then did come down from Roger Goodell, because now we're talking about the owners and the team. It is one of the stiffest penalties in NFL history. I can't ever remember a team losing a 1 and a 3, not to mention the $1.5 million. There have been bigger monetary fines. I think what's his name, Snyder, just got hit with $10 million, deservingly so. Ironically, for similar happenstance to what's going on with Deshaun Watson. That's not what the Dolphins situation is about. But it is crucial to point out they were actually found innocent on the tanking charges. They were found guilty on the tampering charges. And the reason that is so significant is because it is the tanking charges that speak more directly to the lawsuit brought by Brian Flores against the entire NFL for racial discrimination. Now, I know you have to connect some dots to get there, but just trust me when I tell you that it does have an impact there. It's why Flores was so quick to issue a statement. Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins, has thanked the NFL for vindicating, these are his words, vindicating him on the tanking charges. He says he doesn't agree with the tampering charges, but he's not going to appeal so they can move on and take distractions away from their team. But Sean, this is one I don't necessarily have any opinion on personally. Assumed all along that this is the way the tanking thing was going to come down. It is alarming that both Brian Flores and at the time it was Hugh Jackson claimed to have evidence of tanking, and apparently they didn't, because again the arbiter specifically acquitted them on that end. There was some kidding conversation about it, we're told. And Roger Goodell did slap him hard on the wrist and say even kidding conversation shouldn't happen with the integrity of the game. But I think it does help the league a little bit that they're able to say, no, nobody is out there even remotely considering tanking games. Tampering charges, I think they sent a pretty loud message. You want to do it? This is what it's going to cost you.
Look, bad organizations find ways to be bad. And Miami Dolphins got caught for tampering and didn't get either of the guys they were trying to get. They didn't get Tom Brady. They didn't get Sean Payton. I don't know, man. The whole situation is just laughable, I feel like. I mean, what's a $1.5 million fine to Stephen Ross? What does that really do for a guy in that position? I know you're losing a first round pick, but that's a penalty, but that's not the end of the world for the Dolphins. I don't know. That Dolphins organization just is Hub, you said they're trying to get rid of distractions. They're a walking distraction.
Yeah. Well, Kyle, I will say this in answer to Sean. We when we know a guy's got billions of dollars, we tend to turn our noses up at $1.5 million. But $1.5 million is $1.5 million to anybody. But more to the point, what it is, it's a scarlet letter that Stephen Ross will wear for the rest of his life, and that for these wealthy, egocentric individuals, in some cases, is more hurtful than the fine. So again, Sean's right. I mean, it's not going to change his life in any way, other than I'm sure he's very unhappy about it, and some people are never going to respect him again. But in that regard, it is significant.
I don't really have much to add here. I guess what I'll say is, for once, for all the Bears fans in here, you can listen to the dysfunctionality of other organizations and feel a little bit better about your own franchise. The Bears have their problems, but at least they're not dealing with an ownership that is sketchy, I guess I would put it at best.
Yeah, one thing we don't have to worry about is the McCaskies tampering with anybody. So at least, and we do know this. This I can say I never bet my life because I know how dangerous it is. But I can bet my life that the McCaskey family would never consider tanking a game because they, as we know, are much better fans than they necessarily are owners. And I say that based on their record, not trying to criticize them for anything specific. So, yeah, in that regard, it's a way to feel good about being a Bears fan, which we know most of you with us are today. We haven't heard from our Lions friend in a couple of weeks. And by the way, things are going pretty good up in Lions camp. I was doing some homework on that the other day. The division is going to be tougher. I don't know that the Packers are going to be as good as they were last year. They're still going to be a strong favorite. And the Vikings are as interesting as the Bears because who knows what Kevin O'Connell is going to do up there. Definitely setting up for a tougher race this year. Guys, Kyle, unless you've got something else, I think we've probably run pretty well over time. So is it time to say goodbye this week?
Yeah, let's get out of here.
Okay, that's a good way to do it too. So we do want to remind everybody before we go that if you have joined us live for this broadcast, thank you very much. If you're listening as a podcast, we do it on StreamYard, so you can participate. We did get to a number of other folks' questions today, so that's the part that we like the best. If you want to join us live, which during the season, we're pretty good about being consistent 9:30 on Friday mornings. With training camp, we've had to move the schedule around, but you'll find out when we are podcasting by following our Twitter accounts. It's at Sean_Hammond, at Kyle Nabors, or at Hub_Arkush. We will always notify you, a good 12, usually 24 to 36 hours in advance. And if you do prefer just to have the podcast, make sure that you go to the App Store on your phone or iTunes or shawlocal.com. You can download a subscription to the podcast so it is delivered to you automatically each week. And stay at shawlocal.com, guys. Sean and I are filing multiple pieces every day from training camp. It's the best place you can go to get your coverage 24/7. We appreciate you being with us. We hope you have a great week, and we will be back to visit with you next week. We'll be wrapping up Family Fest, which is often a live scrimmage. That is Wednesday of next week, and previewing Saturday's exhibition game. So we'll let you know when that's going to happen as soon as we know. We look forward to talking to you again next week.